All right, so now we are at the next step, which is step 3, and that is to create an email sender function. So for us to do that, there are two things we need to have in place. So the first is to install a package that will help us, manage the email sending process. So that package, the name of that package is Node Mailer. So I'll say npm install and I'll Node Mailer. So that's it, NODEMAILER. So hit enter on that and that should start installing. So while that is going on, I'm going to come to my browser. And all right, so I said there are two things we need to be in place. So that's the first thing is to install Node Mailer. The second is to create an email with Outlook. So just if you don't have an Outlook email, you can just go to outlook.live.com and just quickly create an email. Now, what we're going to need is your username, not your username, the email of the Outlook and your password. All right, so we're going to need those two things. Great. So let's come back to our code editor. All right, you see here that our package is installing. All right, and it's done. So let's just confirm that it's properly installed. I'll come to my package.json and you see here we now have Node Mailer, so we can proceed and go ahead. I'll close this guy up and close the package.json as well. So the first set of instruction, the first step or sub step that I'll take is to come to my .env file and I'll create 3 pieces of variables that I'll use for this email sending process. So let's go. The first is the let me see, just a minute. So we're going to create an email host, email underscore host, and that's going to be equal to smtp mail .outlook.com, like so. So that's the email host. This should be S, sorry about that. Then next we're going to have the email user. So that's going to be the email you just created. So email user, mine is okay, yeah, node course. So mine is node course because this is a Node.js course at outlook.com. So that's mine. Then next you need to create a password. You need to add your password. So here I'll just say email pass, just to keep things simple and short. And then here you're just going to specify your password. Now if your password does not have any special character, you can just go ahead and write the password. But if your password has a special character, you need to put it in single quotes. So your password will go inside the single quote. So for example, if your password has a hash in it, maybe hash 1234, something like this, you just need to put it inside quote. Otherwise you can just write the password out. So these are the 3 pieces of environment variables that we're going to need to implement the email sending function. All right, so just go ahead and say, and by the way, this is not my password, I am just typing it out here so that you know that you should put in your password. So just go ahead and save this file and let's head back to our file manager. So when we want to create a special function that we want to use for something that we want to utilize in a part of our application, we can create a folder for that. So in my own case, I'm going to create a utils folder, utils, just to keep things separate. And inside this utils folder, I will now create a file. I'll call that file send email.js, and basically that's what the function we put inside the send email is going to do. It's going to send an email to whatever email address we specify. Okay, great. So now let's proceed. Now remember we installed Node Mailer. That's what we're going to use to create this send email function. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to require it. So require Node Mailer, and the name of the package is also Node Mailer. Yeah. All right, so let's create an just a regular asynchronous function. So that's going to be a controller function. And we're going to call that function send email. All right, so that's the name of the function. Then, because we're going to use this function in various places in our application, let me just come here and export it so that I don't forget. So here we're just going to say module.export, and it's just going to be equal to the name of the function. So send email, like so. Great. So now we can come inside of this function body and write out the function. I think I want us to be a little bit faster with this one. So we're going to come here, and the first thing is we're going to define what is known as a transporter. It's just like something that carries your email from one point to another. So here I'll say const and then transporter, and that's going to be equal to, so we're going to use this node mailer here. So we're going to say node mailer dot, what we want to do is create transport. So you see I'm already getting the option here. So node mailer dot create transport. You know what, let me open this up so that we have a lot of space, and let's have our parentheses here. Now this is going to take a couple of properties, so I'll put my object there and then open that up. The first property that it needs to take is the host. And remember, we define variables for this stuff in our process.env file. So just to remind you, we have the email host, the email user, and the email password. So the first property here is the host property. So we're going to point to process.env and then dot email host. So email underscore host. All right. I'll add a comma. The next is what is known as the port, P-O-R-T. And this one is going to be 587 according to the documentation. So 587. Then the next is the username and the password, but that's going to be under a property called auth. Now this auth is going to now be an object that will now have two sub properties. The first is going to be the user, and that's going to point to process.env/email user. So let me bring that here. This one is just going to change to email user because that's what we saved in the environment. Then this one is going to be email pass, and of course the property name would also change to pass. Okay, great. So this is the configuration we need to be able to tell our transporter that, look, these are the parameters, this is the field, the engine that you're going to use to send the email. Now there's an issue some people may run into, and that is an issue with HTTPS or security of the platforms you're sending. So what I've read online that tries to, what's it called, to mitigate any issues is that you add a TLS property. Now, like I'm going to say, it's not compulsory you add this, but for some people that run into problems, maybe their email was not sending and stuff like that, they added this TLS property, and then you're going to set the reject unauthorized and set that to false. Okay, so that's about it for this transporter. Like I'm gonna say again, this is not compulsory, but I'm just trying to prevent any future issues people may have. I'm just being proactive about that. Okay, so now let's continue. So we've created our transporter, and maybe I should add a comment here and say create email transporter. So we've created the transporter. That's the first thing. So the next thing is we're going to create what is known as options. Okay, so here I'll just say const, and I'll tell you what that is. Options, and that's going to be equal to, so we're just going to be an object that will have some properties. Now the options are things like, who are you sending the email to, where are you sending the email from, in other words, what email are you going to send this particular message from. When you receive an email, there's a to, there's a from, there's a subject, and then there's a message. In fact, you can even specify a different reply email address. Okay, so those are the options that every email should have. So let's go ahead and add those. So first off, I'm going to specify the from, and you know what, these properties should come from you know what, let me just, this property should come from the point where you are using this send email function. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. So this async here, right, it's not response and request and response we need here. What we need here is the parameters that we're going to use when we are sending the email. For example, if we are using the email in this user controller, then it's from here that we'll now push arguments into the send email functions. And the argument, like I said, will be the options, these options that we're about to create. So here, we don't need request response. What we need is things like, what's the subject of the email? So subject, parameters, then what's the message that you want to send, then who are you sending it to? So here I'll say send underscore to. All right, who are you sending from? So here I'll say sent underscore from. Then lastly, do you want to have a special reply address? So here I'll say reply to underscore to. Yeah, so these are the parameters that whenever we use this send email function somewhere else, these are the parameters we're going to specify, and when we are using it, we're just going to specify these as arguments, right? So here, let's come here and then let's add those. So from is going to be pointing to our sent from. Okay, so I'm sure it's not making sense, right? Then let me just duplicate this, and so this one is going to be to, so this one is going to be send to, and of course this will change to as well. So we're sending the email to. The next one is going to be the reply. So who am I replying to? And it's going to be camel casing, so reply to. And here I'll just make it reply underscore to. Then this one is going to be the subject, so subject, and of course this is also going to be subject. And then the last one is going to be the message. So this message here, I'll actually want to send a HTML email, so I'll say HTML, and then I'll just point it to message. Okay, so these are the options that we need when we want to send an email. Now the last thing we are going to do, so let me add a comment here. I'll say options for sending email. All right, great. So the last piece of code that we need to add is to actually check for whether the email was sent successfully or whether it failed. And if it was sent successfully, we can do something with that. If it failed, we can, get the error message. So here, let me just say finally send the email. All right, so here I'll say transporter dot, then we're going to have the send mail function. Open that. So the first thing here is that we're going to slot in the options. Remember, when you want to send an email, you have to have all these options. So you see this options object here. I'll first slot it in here like this, options. Then I'm going to now have a function, regular function. So use the function keyword, and this function is going to have two parameters. It's going to have an error parameter and an information parameter. So info, this info is the variable that we hold the information about the success. In other words, if the email was sent successfully, it's going to be in the info parameter. If there was an error, it will be in the error parameter. So now let's go ahead and open this up, and then we're just going to have an if statement here. So I'll say if there was an error, then I just want to log that error to the console. So print to the console and error. So then else I'll just log the what's it called, the info to the console. So that's it basically. This function now that we've created, we can use it to send email from any part of our application. This utility function that we've created, and that's one of the things I appreciate about separation of concerns in programming as a concept. So let's go ahead and save this. We're not going to test this immediately, but we're going to test it eventually. All right, so I'll just save this and let's go to our instruction.txt file, which says that the next thing we need to do is to create the controller function for the forgot password route. So we're going to do that in the next video.